What's up, movie fans? Guys, today I am talking about the third season of a show that I've actually never talked about before on my channel. Am I even qualified to do this? Maybe I should bring on like some sort of expert or something to help me out.
The cavalry has arrived.
Grand Admiral Thrawn, my
Hello,
old ally.
So, today we are going to be reviewing the third season of an animated Star Wars show. Obviously, it's The Bad Batch. I've actually reviewed season 2 on my channel before. However, this guy has never talked about it on his channel once.
Which is kind of bizarre because I have actually been watching this show since the very first episode.
As have I.
I've never talked about it before, and now this is my last chance because season 3 was the final season of the show.
So, we're going to do episode by episode, and at the very end, we're going to go through characters overall. So, starting off with episode 1.
Confined.
This episode really does a good job of getting you a sense of what it's like on Mount Tantus, what this prison is like, and how it is very unescapable.
Episode 1 just does a really good job at introducing the situation that Omega is in here.
Yeah.
Throughout this entire show, like since season 1, Omega has had one major character trait that is both kind of her biggest strength and weakness. She's kind of naive and she kind of sees the best in everyone and every situation, which sometimes can be a really bad thing, but in certain cases, like the case that she's in the first episode of the show, it's actually helpful because even though she's in like this terrible, inescapable situation, she's still able to see the best in it.
This episode also does a good job of showing you that Emery is not evil like the rest of these people here at Tantus. Also, this episode introduces us to Batcher, and I've told him actually before, there have been Star Wars dogs since, like, Return of the Jedi, and yet we've never had anything like a group of people has a Star Wars dog.
One thing that I find really funny about this episode is how throughout it, Omega is, like, sharing her entire, like, life story with Crosshair, and the whole time he's just consistently annoyed with it.
Yeah.
It's also cool to see Hemlock being a threatening villain, as always.
He's a great villain.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna move on to episode 2.
Paths Unknown.
What I really love the most about this episode is it shows us what it's like for Hunter now that they've lost Tech. And you see his struggle of how he's trying to fill Tech's shoes, except he can't do it because he's not Tech.
Yeah.
Nobody is Tech. They don't have Tech anymore. This one also shows how Wrecker and him are adapting to not only losing Tech, but they've also lost Omega. Hunter and Wrecker are two characters that they'll occasionally team up in the show, but I don't know, like up until this season, I don't think we've ever really seen like a bunch of screen time dedicated to just Hunter and Wrecker.
That's probably accurate.
This episode also shows us what happened to the clone cadets at the end of season 1. 3 of them at least. And I like that those kids are actually part of the story. They could have just made them like one and done, but no, the kids actually kind of have an arc of where they decide that these people are here to help us, so let's not leave them for dead.
Yeah, all of that stuff is cool. I do appreciate getting an episode that deals with the impact of Tech's death, because obviously that is the biggest, like, emotional gut punch of the whole show. But I'm not a huge fan of episode 2 just because I wish they had picked a better antagonist for the episode. The antagonist is basically just like this monster that has like weeds. That's basically it.
I kind of disagree. I like it because it shows that Hemlock is doing more experiments than just Project Necromancer.
That is cool, but I just wish that there had been a little bit more tension to the episode, but
this
still.
episode is also the episode where Gonki is the most important to a plot that he's ever been, and I love the fact that they actually made a box with legs important to the episode.
I just love the fact that Gonki is an actual important character in this show in general.
Moving on to episode 3. Episode 3 is a great episode. It's a great prison break episode. Obviously there are better ones, but still, this one is pretty good considering that it's how Omega and Crosshair get out of Tantus.
This is something that I'm going to say about both episode 3 and episode 4. I just love Omega and Crosshair's dynamic with each other when they're alone.
Because Omega is about positive, like, she's the pro, and Crosshair's always looking at the negative on stuff. Like, she doesn't want to kill people, he has no issue with pulling the trigger.
She's also, like, super optimistic in every situation, and Crosshair looks at things a little bit more realistically.
I like the fact that even though Crosshair doesn't want her to, she still comes back to get him out, and she won't leave without him. Another thing about this episode, this is the one where you see Palpatine show up, and it, like, hints at what Project Necromancer is. Obviously, we already know what it is, but if you haven't seen, and you're, like, watching all this in chronological order, it helps. Like, it really does help. And this episode has some great action in it, too.
Yes.
Episode 4. I like this episode a lot because Crosshair and Omega, like you just said, have amazing interactions and chemistry together. Batcher is important in this one, too.
That's true. I just think this is a fun episode, truth be told. I don't have, like, a lot of stuff to say about this episode, honestly. I just think it's fun to see Omega and Crosshair's dynamic with each other, and I think that the ending of this episode is one of the best scenes in the show.
It is. That is a very emotional scene. And it's just a great scene seeing their reunion of Omega and the Bad Batch.
And then you just have Crosshair walk out of the ship, and you just have that final shot where it's just Hunter and Crosshair staring at each other, and that's just a great way to finish it.
I think the funniest part of this episode has got to be that they go through all that trouble for 30,000 credits that they never even use, and then they steal it back at the end of the episode, but it's never used throughout the rest of the season, and there are some points where they could have used that money. Okay, so episode 5, The Return. I'm saying the title in this one because I really like this one.
I think that this is a good episode, but I'm gonna let him talk about it because he really likes this one.
The Outpost is probably the best episode of this show, and in this episode we return to the Outpost. But I think what I love the most about this episode is that Hunter and Crosshair, like, Omega, she's fine. She'll accept Crosshair. And same with Wrecker, because Wrecker's missed Crosshair. But Hunter actually doesn't trust him, and he shouldn't. Crosshair has tried to kill them, and he needs to learn that Crosshair is actually turned good. I mean, we know that. Hunter doesn't trust him, and it's kind of Crosshair's fault that Tech is gone, because they tried to rescue Crosshair and lost Tech.
Yeah, I just think that this is a really good episode for character development, since you kind of have Hunter and Crosshair growing to trust each other again.
I think my favorite moment in this episode, though, has got to be when Crosshair is picking up the helmets of all the dead clones that have just been kicked onto the floor.
Yeah.
And is putting them up like that to honor Mayday and his troops.
And I also like the moment where he's, like, looking up at the sky and he sees the birds, which were, like, the birds were, like, basically the main symbol of the Outpost, and it's just cool to get them acknowledging that again.
I like how the Bad Batch already accept Batcher, but they still aren't ready to trust Crosshair. That is an untamed wild dog that they accept before they accept someone that's their own brother.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
But yeah, I think this is a great character episode and a great episode in my opinion.
Yes. Episode 6. Actually, I feel like we can kind of talk about episode 6 and 7 together. Infiltration and Extraction.
You can't talk about one without the other. They're connected. They both released on the same week. They're connected.
These episodes are about the Bad Batch basically helping Rex and the Clone Rebellion, and it also gives us more insight into what the Clone X-Troopers actually are.
Yes, you get to see how tough one of these CX troopers is when he takes out Rex's entire camp all on his own.
Yeah, except for
the main characters.
Rex, the Bad Batch, and Hauser, and Gregor.
Yeah. So what I think I like the most about this is that Hauser does not trust Crosshair, because Hauser was sent to jail because of Crosshair. These two should not just be buddy-buddy. They know that. They know their lore, and they followed up on it. And we get to see more of Crosshair, how he cares about Omega. I do wish Echo actually had a part in this episode, because he does return in The Return. But then in both of these, he's got one scene, and I do like the scene of him giving Omega that crossbow.
I'll say, I know that I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but I wish Echo had a part in this season up until the last, third of it.
He has a part in The Return,
actually. He does, but other than that...
I do really like this episode. I love the action in it. You really get to see how Crosshair is struggling with his hand the most in this, and what Tantus has done to his hand, how he's constantly grabbing it and twitching.
There's a lot of stuff that happens with Crosshair's hand in this season.
Yeah. I love the scene where the CX is shooting at him and he can't shoot back. So instead he shoots an explosive at the CX.
Yeah, that was
scene
cool.
Is awesome.
The other thing about these episodes that we've got to mention is Wolf is in this episode.
I love Wolf's cameo in this episode. People that say Dave Filoni is just cameos, they're idiots, because I can only think of one cameo he's ever done where it hasn't fit into the story, and that's Greedo in Clone Wars.
I could also kind of say C-3PO in Ahsoka. But...
Yeah, that one has a reason.
Yeah, it does.
He can work in any cameo and make it work, and it actually feels important to the story. And I love the conversation between Rex and Wolf of how Wolf didn't know that these were clones. The Empire is lying to him, and his men are there to kill their own brother. And that's what Rex tells him. He doesn't tell him that, no, we're fighting the Empire. He tells him that they're fighting for their brothers to get through to Wolf.
And it also kind of sets up the fact that eventually Rex, Gregor, and Wolf are going to end up on that walker in Rebels together. Yeah, that was just cool. It's cool to see him again, and it's cool to get all of that development for him.
So I think that's all we have to say about these two. They're really good episodes. They've got a lot of great action, and I really liked seeing Wolf in them.
Moving on to the episode in this season that I assume we both probably have the least to say about, Episode 8, Bad Territory. I feel like this episode is kind of at a disadvantage overall, because I think that what they did here was they kind of went okay, first 7 episodes, we need to set up all of this stuff and establish where the season is going, and then we're going to take a little break. And then in the last 7 episodes, we're going to do crazy stuff again.
So I do like what happens with the two teams in this one. I like seeing Fennec back. She was in season 1, and then she kind of wasn't in the show anymore. So I do like seeing Fennec back. And I like seeing Hunter and Wrecker again, more of them, and they're the ones doing action, because for a while there, we were only really seeing Crosshair and Omega, so it's cool to see Wrecker and Hunter back in the spotlight. And I do really like the action between this one and how they have to trust Fennec, even though they don't really trust her, and they don't know if they should trust her.
Yeah, I think that it's a fine episode. It's just that in the overall season, there's just not a lot to say about this one.
I like the fact that they follow up on having AZ, because unlike with season 2, you get AZ in 2 episodes of season 2. In this season, they actually have him important in most of the episodes. Okay, so moving on to episode 9, the one that has, the biggest thing to bait people into it.
Yes. Episode 9, The Harbinger.
The return of Asajj Ventress, a beloved character that we haven't seen since Clone Wars Season 5, and it was great seeing Ventress back.
I thought that it was really cool seeing her back. I will say, okay, I think that in this case, it is kind of a cheap trick to bring her back because she did die in the book Dark Disciple.
Yes. However,
yeah,
this isn't the first time they've retconned a book.
Yeah, that's true.
The Kanan comics were retconned in Season 1. And I gotta say this, though. I like the fact that they kind of reference that book at the end and allude to that those events are still canon.
Yeah.
Unlike with the Kanan comics. I love the way how Ventress, how the Bad Batch don't trust her. And this is the only episode I kind of have to give the excuse of Echo not being there fitting. Because the rest of the Bad Batch, yes, they do not trust Ventress, but if Echo were there, there is no way in hell they would have ever trusted Ventress. Because Echo has been here since Clone Wars. He would never trust Ventress, okay?
Yeah, he was there during, like, the invasion of Kamino in Season 3, where Ventress was a big part of that, and
I love the action sequences between when the Bad Batch have to fight Ventress.
Yes, that was cool.
The thing I will say about this episode, I kind of think some of those tests were lame. Like, obviously the second test is not a real test. That's just to get Omega away.
Yeah.
And the first one is just a practice one. And the third one is actually pretty good. It's just, I think they could have been a little better.
Yeah. I am happy that they didn't just have her, like, take Omega's blood, though. Because that would have been so lazy.
Episode 10. Now, this is another episode that we kind of have a disadvantage to. It's not one with action. It's just one where you get to see from Emery's perspective about what is going on with Project Necromancer and all the research that she's been doing for Dr. Hemlock.
With that being said, I still think that this episode is actually really good. The Bad Batch does this a few times throughout all 3 seasons. Just every season has one episode where it's not technically the Bad Batch's show. Yeah. It's a different character
that's
being
being said,
focused on.
I do really like this one because you get to see more of Emery. And you get to see that the Empire is kidnapping children.
Yeah.
Okay, Cad Bane is hired to kidnap a baby.
Yes.
And I think my favorite scene is where the guy that gave the tip, when Cad Bane is paying him, he throws the money at the wall, which kind of gave me the impression that even Cad Bane thinks this guy is a scumbag.
This episode truly shows that this Project Necromancer, is actually, like, one of the top 10 worst things that the Empire has ever done.
This really shows that the Empire are just, like, they can be brutal monsters. Like, that's something I like about Bad Batch. They can show, like, stormtroopers getting killed in embarrassing ways, and Wilhelm screams, and it'll be funny. But they don't make it that the Empire is just a joke. They will make it that this is a threatening thing, but there'll still be funny moments with it. You do get to see more of Scorch in this episode, which I really love, as Scorch is my favorite member of Delta Squad. He has not played Republic Commando, so he has no attachment to him.
My only actual experiences with Scorch have been this show and that one scene in the Clone Wars.
Now we're moving on to episode 11.
Which is Point of No Return.
Yeah.
I really love this episode.
Yeah, this is a great episode. Point of No Return is basically just, they are royally screwed. Whatever the worst thing that can happen to them is, it's going to happen now.
I think that this is the kind of episode that you kind of have to have in every final season of a TV show.
Like, this is their darkest moment.
Yeah, just the episode where everything, like, goes to crap.
The Marauder explodes, and Wrecker is taken down because he's next to the explosion.
Yes.
The Empire has found Pabu and is torturing the citizens.
Yeah.
You have Hunter trying to steal a ship, and then that ship is shot down into the ocean. And you have Batcher going loose trying to take on stormtroopers. Just everything bad that can happen in this episode is happening.
And arguably the biggest failure in this episode is Omega getting captured, and Crosshair. I love the way that they subtly set this up over the course of the season, where you kind of think, like, at first that his hand thing is just going to be something that he kind of, like, solves quickly as just a tiny piece of character development. But no, it is a crucial flaw that leads to him losing Omega because he was supposed to plant the tracking device.
Some people compare this to The Mandalorian Season 2 because, oh, the ship blew up and, oh, the kid was captured, but that's just two things, okay?
And this is arguably more devastating.
Yes, in The Mandalorian Season 2, there isn't a group of people. There is just well, there is technically, but still. The point is that they're different, and this one honestly has worse stuff happen because in this one, the Empire is burning Pabu down. Like, they aren't hurting the people, but they're destroying their livelihood. They said they're a fishing people, and they just destroyed all their boats. They're going to need to fix those. You also get the return of those 3 clone kids from episode 2, which I really liked.
They are in there. This is just a great episode that sets up the final stretch of the show, which we're now going to get into.
Okay, episode 12. I know you didn't have a lot to say about this one.
I didn't care that much about this
episode.
But
there is something that I gotta say about this episode. Clone turbo tanks have been a thing since Revenge of the Sith. And they're like the only vehicle that Clone Wars or Rebels never gave a purpose to. Every Clone Wars vehicle gets its moment to be cool. Like the AT-T, you get that episode in Rebels about Rex's walker. And just like, you have something like that for every Clone Wars vehicle, like those tanks that are used to defeat the Zillo Beast.
That's true.
The Clone Turbo Tank has never had that moment. So seeing an episode about Juggernaut, which is another thing those are called, just seeing all the cool stuff that one of those things can do. Because these are the only things in Star Wars with wheels. These are these massive tanks with wheels.
Yeah, I thought it was like a cool action-oriented episode. Yes. I just didn't think a lot happened in it. Obviously, you do get the one major story development, which is that they have to rely on Rampart, the main villain of the first half of this show, to help them going into the final few episodes. And that's cool, bringing that back. But otherwise, I thought that this was just a fine action episode, not really a great story one.
I don't have much to say other than that I love the action in this one, and we finally got clone turbo tanks being cool.
Yeah.
Moving on to episode 13.
Into the Breach.
Yeah.
I really like this episode.
Yes. Echo's back, and he's pretty good in this episode because this is one where he's more important. I'd say that, like, from this point on, he's no longer in the background. This one doesn't have much happen in it, but it's a very important episode, and it's got a lot of tension in it.
That's really the main thing that I like about this. This is a tense episode.
Yeah.
Where you have them
infiltrating that base to find the Tantus coordinates.
And you have that super tense moment at the end of the episode where they have to get on to the ship before it goes to hyperspace, but they can't have it detect them, so they gotta wait for Echo to deactivate it. And that was just a really tense...
I also like that you get to see a little more of Rampart and that he's a dick. Like, he's a dick.
I just think it's kind of fun to just see him as this really just sassy, annoying jerk in these final few episodes.
Yeah. Moving on, episode 14.
Flash Strike. This is the penultimate episode.
And this is where the Bad Batch have finally reached Tantus, and one of them actually gets to infiltrate Mount Tantus. The Echo gets into Mount Tantus by disguising as a TK trooper. However, Wrecker, Hunter, Crosshair, and Rampart have not. They get shot down. And this one also is a great action episode.
Yes, it's a great action episode. And then while all of that stuff is happening with the Bad Batch, where there's just a ton of action, you also have in the background Omega
planning her prison escape with these kids. And you get to see that Omega actually cares for these kids. And she's great with everybody. I can't think of anyone that Omega can't get along with.
I think that it's just really cool to see Omega kind of like helping these kids get through like this super traumatic situation, especially in episode 15, which we will get to.
So this episode also has the reveal that the Zillo Beast is back. Something that I even asked you, I'm like, hey, do you think they're going to bring the Zillo Beast back? And you're like, I don't think so.
I said no. We were talking about this like the week before this episode came out. I mentioned I didn't think it was going to return just because I thought that would be too much stuff to explore in these last two episodes. By the way,
because I also guessed Keller and Beck in a way, because I said, hey, do you think... I was saying this as a joke, but I was like, Jar Jar Binks will show up in The Mandalorian. And then the very next day, he did.
But he didn't, though. It wasn't Jar Jar.
I'm counting it. So anyway...
It was the actor. Okay, anyway.
Okay, so back to the episode, because this is the Bad Batch review. Good episode. A lot of great stuff happens in it. And you see that Beast damage Wrecker, which actually carries over to the next episode.
Yes. So, now...
we're here.
The
cavalry has arrived.
I love that title.
Yes,
just
that is
because...
the first line we ever got from any member of the Bad Batch, Wrecker, obviously. But it's perfect because this could be our last time we ever see any of them. So it fits to have their first line be their last episode's title. Also, like the intro, the Disney Star Wars intro is now purely in gray. It's usually got that blue and that red, but now it's just dark gray, like their armor is now.
I love the, like, changes that they did. They also did this in Clone Wars, but, like, the changes with the title sequences for the final episode.
There is a lot we gotta talk about with this finale.
This is such a, like, insane finale.
This finale has so much great action, but it also has so much great story, and it balances them perfectly. I love that this episode actually balances all these different characters that it has to cut between. It's got to cut into Hemlock, it's got to cut to the Bad Batch, it's got to cut into Emery and Echo and Omega and the kids, and it just balances them all perfectly.
I guess let's start with the Zillo Beast, because that's basically how the episode starts.
Omega setting the Zillo Beast loose to cause all that rampage so that the Bad Batch have a chance. That's awesome. The Zillo Beast is Star Wars' Godzilla. And it's amazing seeing it rampage.
I just think it's really cool that they were, like, really playing the long game with this, because the Zillo Beast, which was a cliffhanger from Clone Wars Season 2, like, over a decade ago, ends up being a crucial piece of the finale of a show that came out over a decade after the Clone Wars started, and that's just really cool.
So, another thing I want to talk about, Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair. I love the tension and just the arguing between them where Crosshair says, I'm going in alone, Clone Force 99 died with Tech, and just... that is amazing, okay? And this is one guy saying that, and you don't think that. When you see that scene, you think, I mean, honestly, with the whole show, but like that really shows how talented D. Bradley Baker is.
I also love the fact that that whole argument that is happening between them, it's not something I really thought in the moment, but I realized later, those are the original members.
Yeah, that's what's left of them.
Yeah, because Tech is obviously gone.
Echo's an additional member, and so is Omega.
So these three, like, they're the ones who have seen it all, so it's really interesting to get, like, their perspectives on everything.
I love the action in this episode, but I also love the emotional points between Echo and Emery, where we've known Echo for the longest out of all these characters, so if there's anyone that's going to turn another clone good, I'm glad it was him.
Just the entire, like, action sequence between the Bad Batch and the CX troopers where Crosshair loses his hand.
Yes. I love the fact that there is, like, a CX member to match every member of the Bad Batch. You have the big guy with those knuckle things. He's like a match for Wrecker. You've got the guy with those sword things who's a match for Hunter. And then the sniper one that we've already met. And the Bad Batch are outnumbered here. And I just love the action in this episode.
Yeah.
Then Echo and Omega regroup, and then they set all the other clones free. And I love it's Echo who says that speech, because he is the one that would fight the most for clone rights out of them all.
That's true. I mean, he's the one who joined Rex's rebellion and everything.
And speaking of Rex's rebellion, I'm kind of glad that they didn't show up. This isn't Rex's rebellion, the show.
Yeah.
We might even be getting that as a show. This is about the Bad Batch, so I'm so glad that it was just them doing the freeing of Tantus.
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of expected Rex's rebellion to show up, but I don't have a problem with them not showing up. Like, this is the Bad Batch, so that's fine to me.
This episode really shows you Hemlock as a villain, because he's always seen himself as that he's too important, and he's never been afraid. We have never seen him afraid on screen, because he knows that I'm too important for the Empire. They'll never let anything happen to me. But he is actually scared in the finale.
Yeah.
In his final moment.
I love the scene with Nala Se and Rampart, both of their final scenes, since they both die.
I like that they kind of redeem Nala Se, but they don't entirely, because she is a bad person. She's the reason Fives died.
Yeah.
But I love the most is that Rampart is the guy that blew up Kamino, and a Kaminoan is who blows him up with an explosive.
I also love the fact that I saw somebody mention this online and I thought it was hilarious. Nala Se died from a shot to the chest, just like Fives. Rampart died in an explosion, just like everyone on Kamino. Poetic justice.
And I love when we get to see Wrecker go full on rampage, because he is furious at what they are doing. They have tortured him and his brothers. They're gonna hurt Omega, and like, we've seen Wrecker go rampage, but I don't think we've ever seen him go full force. The bridge scene, that is an amazing scene. The tension between it, where Crosshair finally gets to redeem himself with his final shot.
Yeah, you just have all three of them, Hunter, Crosshair, and Omega, kind of bring their skills together in order to beat Hemlock, finally.
And then that's not the end of this episode. We get more to it. People online say that they played the safe card. I'd argue they did the opposite, because everyone is expecting another Bad Batch member to die here. And they could have easily been like, okay, Crosshair's finally going to redeem himself. Yeah, it's expected. No. Crosshair gets to live a happy life with the rest of the Bad Batch, and that is an arc that he doesn't think he's worthy to live that life.
Yeah. I will say, I do think that to a certain extent, you could argue that the finale of Bad Batch is kind of the safe finale, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I still think that the finale is extremely satisfying, and that it gives all of the characters a good ending.
I love the scene between Hunter and Omega where he says, "Whatever we want, kid." That's great, and then the rest of them just sit together.
Yeah.
And then I also love the ending scene where it's an adult Omega talking to an old man Hunter. And I honestly am glad it's just Hunter there, because he's the one that's the closest to Omega. He's been like a father to her since episode 1.
Yeah, he basically is her father, like...
So I'm glad that he gets to be the last person that she sees. And I like to see that Omega joined the rebellion to go have her own adventures.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see her again one day. It's entirely possible, which would be cool.
So we've talked a lot about the finale. I have one flaw with it. Scorch. Now, I'm honestly fine with them killing off Scorch. I would have been fine with that. However, it's that we don't know why he is so loyal to the Empire. I would have liked just one scene about why is Scorch doing all this. And they don't even have to do that. They could have just simply stunned Scorch. Okay, so now that we've wrapped up all the episodes, we're going to go through some of the characters real quick.
Which shouldn't take too long, because we've already talked about most of them for the most part.
Starting with Hunter, I love what they do with Hunter. I do think he's kind of underused a little in this season, but I love the way how he struggles to fill Tech's shoes because he's not Tech. I love the way that he's trying to be there for Omega and that he learns to trust Crosshair. And I love his action sequences. Wrecker, he's always great comedic relief.
Yeah,
and he's great in this season.
Wrecker's kind of just the most fun character in this entire show. He's kind of like, in a way, the most wholesome character in the show.
No, I'd say it's Omega.
It's kind of Omega, but he's just a ton of fun here. There's not really much more to say other than that.
Speaking of Omega, she's handled great in this season. I love how she's the one who turns Crosshair back into a Bad Batch member. And she's handled great here.
Yeah.
I find it weird that she has that crossbow in the poster and she never even uses it.
That's true.
We get a scene of Echo giving it to her and then she never uses it.
I also didn't really get to mention, in episode 15, one scene that I absolutely love is the scene where Omega is with the kids and she mentions to the one kid who says that he's afraid of heights that her brother, Wrecker, who is the great, like, one of the greatest
soldier I know.
Yeah.
My brother Wrecker hates heights, and he's the strongest soldier I've ever met.
And that's just, like, a really cool, like, payoff to, like, how throughout this entire show and Clone Wars, we constantly mention that Wrecker is afraid of heights, and that's just,
Crosshair, I love what they do with him. He has a great arc throughout this entire season.
Yeah.
He's kind of the main character of this season.
That's true. Crosshair is definitely my favorite character in this season. I just think that this season managed to finally bring his arc full circle by him finally getting his brothers back and redeeming himself for everything he's done.
And I'm glad that he gets to have his happy ending.
Yeah.
Echo, he's kind of always been in the shadow of the other Bad Batch members, which kind of sucks because he's the character we've known the longest out of them all.
Since Clone Wars Season 1.
So I do wish they could have done more with him. However, what they do with him, I love all of that. Okay, I love him in the final few episodes, and I love him in the return.
Plus, truth be told, it kind of makes sense that Echo isn't a major, like, character for most of this season, because he's not a Bad Batch member anymore.
Yeah, he left in Season 2. That's something a bunch of people forget.
Yeah.
The final two characters we have to cover aren't actually Bad Batch members. Dr. Hemlock. Hemlock is an amazing villain. I immediately liked him more than Rampart. I'm not saying Rampart is bad, but I've always thought of Rampart as just like Tarkin Jr.
Yeah, that's true.
And they already had Tarkin there, so he just kind of felt unnecessary to me. I still like him, but Hemlock is this unique villain. He is this insane scientist who does horrible experiments on clones and just... He's never scared except for when he finally is.
Yeah.
And he's always got that creepy hand thing that's just like... He's just a creepy villain that sends chills down your spine.
I would talk about him, but I kind of already did that, like, last week in my Star Wars Villains video, so just watch that.
Yeah, and then the final character we want to touch on, we've already touched on her a lot. I really like what they did with Emery. When I saw Season 2 and I saw the scene where she goes, "We're sisters, Omega," I'm like, this is going to be so dumb, but I actually really liked Emery's character.
Yeah, I think that it's cool that she's just kind of this person within this organization who realizes how terrible and messed up everything they're doing is, and she eventually becomes good at the end thanks to the influence that Omega and Echo had on her.
Yeah. So overall, I think that the Bad Batch Season 3 was a great send-off to a great Star Wars show. I think they did a good job with this season.
Yeah, I definitely really like this season. I would say that it's kind of tied as my favorite season of the show with Season 1.
Is just really good.
Yeah, Season 1 is great. I think that Season 2 is kind of the weakest. Not to say it's bad, it's not, but it's just the weakest of the three. But yeah, Season 3 was fantastic. I would give it an 8 out of 10. What would you give it?
I'm giving it a 99. Yeah, Bad Batch Season 3, great season. I heavily recommend that you watch it if you're a Star Wars fan. So it was great to be here, movie fan. I had a good time.
See ya, movie fans.
You know, you got quite an impressive art collection here. It's not as good as mine. Oh, wait.
That's the spot?
This is a great piece of art. I think it'll fit nicely in my art collection.
Wait, you're gonna bring it back, right? Thrawn? Thrawn!